go to one. Over the last year or so, obviously I'm against the filter, and I recall seeing all sorts of excuses for instance, say Senator Conroy in favour of it. One moment I heard it even degenerating down to blaming the Russian mob for hacking the dentist's email accounts. Well, I guess to me it's sort of baffling that he'd even be pursuing it. All that seems to be the strength of his current argument in here, more or less. I mean, like you say, push the argument is not going to work.
All of us who've dared to question the wisdom of the filter have, of course, been accused of people who want to see child porn readily accessible and all types of horrible things have been said and thrown at us, and politics should live with that. I think the interesting thing with Conroy's approach along the way is that he's realised this is a very difficult policy to actually get right and to get through. But having promised it, he's been dead set committed to try to enact the promise one way or another. That's why the promise has shifted a bit over time. Of course, before the last election, it was basically going to find some magical way to protect kiddies from all of the nasties on the internet. Then it was pretty quickly realised that was never going to be possible, that you can never put that type of filter in place without having such a horrific block on information and freedom of access on the web that you would put the whole country in uproar. So he's had to step back from that. He's now looking at refused classification sites. That still includes material that a lot of people would regularly freely access. It also, of course, still leaves plenty of material that children probably shouldn't access. They're the flaws that still exist in just the content side, let alone the technology side of how the filtering works and how people jump around it. But why is he continuing to push so hard to do it? Well, I think that's just pure politics of honouring the promise, and if I'm being entirely honest, hoping that he might cause our side of politics a bit of grief along the way. One of the encouraging things for me is that some of my colleagues who are closer to groups like Christian Lobby and so on have already spoken out and indicated that they're opposed to this, and made it quite clear that they're willing to stand up to that lobby that will also be arguing potentially on this issue and could cause splits within the coalition in terms of our viewpoint. But people like Alan Talk have made their views pretty clear already that despite coming from the right of the Liberal Party and coming from a more conservative or background with links into some of those other groups, they will stand up and oppose it as well. Yes, mate.
Well, once upon a time,
so that's Jeremy hiding under that cap. Yes, okay. Yeah.
So, as you may remember, I was once upon a time a very low-level hack, and my perspective on being here is really to get from you an idea of what are the political realities in terms of how grassroots campaigns can actually put sufficient leverage on the government to not just be in the opposition, but to actually get them thinking, hang on, let's actually go out of here. What's the electoral map of the demographics and that sort of thing in terms of who's going to be for it, who's going to be opposed, which of those people are swinging voters? There's more of those
what comes clear on this issue is that it engages young people in a big way, and when you flip that across to electoral data, young people have predominantly voted more for the Labor Party than outside of politics. So there's great opportunity there for us and great risk there for the government in terms of losing a key voting bloc. And it's certainly an argument we've put internally that as a Liberal Party wanting to pitch itself in a modern environment, there's a whole range of things we should do. Some of them we're good at, some of them we're not so good at. But this is an issue that gives potential to engage with the youth market and demonstrate that we're listening and able to actually understand. That's where I hope we can stand for people running a campaign on this, emphasising to government and government members that they're risking a key demographic, a very large demographic, and a growing demographic in terms of people. The one sector where every election you have new voters who have a far better understanding, reaching to a use of technology than previous ones, is of course happening at those early voting stages. So I think that's certainly the sector to emphasise that that's where votes are on the line, and that's where you can shift support from. Yes, mate?
Thanks.
No worries.
I'm obviously against it, but I do keep getting stories and just looking at something about if this legislation went through, then we'd be entering the ranks of Iran and China. I mean, that's true. Is there in that?
Australia is a country with a very strong democratic principle to it, and I wouldn't want to overstate the idea that government is setting in place this filter to then, as the thin end of the wedge, to start filtering everything that everybody has access to. As I said, I don't see the best arguments on this as being free speech because the way the government is drawing this up in the first instance is fairly narrow in terms of what they're talking about trying to do. There will be unintended consequences from it, and that's the real risk, that there will be some things blocked that shouldn't be. There are some things that will be blocked that in an ideal world possibly should be, but the fact that you can't, it's a little bit, in some ways, to having used margarine as one bad analogy, I'll use the death penalty as another one. In some ways, many people stand against the death penalty for those one or two instances where you end up executing the wrong person. Now, in terms of filtering, what you've got to be conscious of is how many instances there are of blocking content that should still be freely available. And some of that argument is inadvertent blocking, some of it will be where government decides to define the boundaries and arguments about government defining the boundaries. And that's where you really run into clear censorship arguments of, well, hang on a minute, government defining censorship becomes a difficult thing. Now, we have it in other forms of media, but it's more easily staggered in other forms of media as well, in terms of their availability and age access and so on, whereas the internet is so freely available to every home in the country, broadband speeds allowing, you actually, if you start banning it for 5-year-olds, you're banning it for everybody under their proposal.
What about the argument against the test, like we've only done a 7 megabits per second when we're going to 100 megabits per second, and where certain values being say that that's okay, which is just not.
Yeah, and a lot of those technological arguments are valid and well worth pursuing as well. That testing that's being done, different people will question aspects of it, but there are a lot of questions that still exist around it as to whether the testing has happened at good speeds, with enough users, etc., and the reality that you don't want to put something in place that dramatically slows down web content, especially at a time when government and everybody else is saying it's a priority to increase access speeds.
Just on the pragmatism argument, what sort of value do you think there would be rather than approaching it as it won't work for X, Y, and Z reason, actually pointing out that any sort of building is actually kind of used to establish the band-aid, and money would be better spent hiring more people to police and educating kids so that they can actually identify the situations that they shouldn't be able to do rather than just saying, looking at that findings obviously is sort of creating a process is going to fail because
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, when I say it won't work, we should be taking every argument to the fact that it won't work. So not just that you won't manage to filter all the type of content that should be filtered and provide that safe environment, but that absolutely you'll never be able to do that because you're talking about chat rooms as being unsafe places and all types of other things that will never be filtered, but where parents should be monitoring the use of the web by their children, and where, of course, types of activity are undertaken that